We have a number of important news stories about Tesla to share. First, this morning, BYD, the largest China automaker making electric vehicles, announced that all its vehicles priced above $13,000 will be equipped with what they're calling God's Eye Advanced Driver Assistance System. It has 3 levels of ADAS offerings: God's Eye C for low-cost vehicles, God's Eye B uses LiDAR sensors, as well as God's Eye A for its luxury brand. This is a significant development, and we'll take a look at what it can do. Second, China has hit back with retaliatory tariffs on $14 billion worth of US goods. Lots of people started to freak out. But do these new tariffs actually impact Tesla? Related to this, are Tesla sales actually tanking across the world? We've got Jeff Lutz here with us today, and he has a lot of great analysis to share. Third, Tesla showed off a new video of the features of the revised Model Y. We saw 3 Easter eggs of vehicles hidden behind. And fourth, Tesla has introduced a new incentive, now offering 0.99% financing for Model 3s in Canada. And for some reason, they raised the price of the Model X by $5,000, now no longer qualifying for the $7,500 Fed EV credit. I've got Jeff Lutz here with us. He's a multi-decade supply chain executive and chief quality officer. He's now CEO of his own supply chain consulting firm. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Hey, Herbert. Pretty eventful weekend. Usually, it seems like things are really ramping up now on the weekends.
And one of the things that we really, really appreciate you being here, Jeff, is like a lot of these things we're talking about today, there's a lot of misunderstanding, especially Tesla investors. There's fear because they're hearing these things and they want to know what is real, what isn't. And what I like about what you've done, you should follow him on his X account because he shares actual data points to defend his analysis. This is really good. The first one, it sounds pretty scary. Here's BYD, the largest EV automaker in China, and the chairman was on stage announcing some new features. Basically, they're calling it God's Eye Driver Assistance System. There's going to be 3 intelligent driving classifications. So the entry level for the low-cost cars is going to be called God's Eye C. It relies on a 3-camera cluster sitting behind the windshield. As the entry-level tier ADAS system, the God's Eye C will be adopted by cars under BYD brand. This perception system will be powered by what they're calling the D-Pilot 100 system with a peak computing power of 100 tops. Okay. The God Eye C includes 12 cameras, these radars, these ultrasonic radars. These cameras consist of 3 front cameras, 5 panoramic cameras, and 4 surrounding view cameras. 5 millimeter wave radars provide 360-degree non-dead angle perception. The front radar is a detection system of 300 meters, and then the ultrasonics is 1 centimeter, 12 ultrasonics at parking sensors. So loaded with LiDARs and radars, just like Waymo cars, for example. So then they have a God's Eye B. That's their second ADAS system. And that includes LiDAR. So these guys are a LiDAR-based company, and it's going to power a couple of their cars and some of the flagship cars under the BYD brand. And then you've got the God's Eye A, and that's going to be for the luxury brand Yangwang. Okay. So if we listen to what he says, this is what the chairman said. He said, BYD has the largest car cloud database in China. And he says that we have 110,000 engineers. Wow, that's a ton of engineers. 5,000 of them are intelligent driving R&D engineers. In 2024, BYD's ADAS training mileage was 72 million kilometers per day. Keep in mind, he's calling it ADAS still, but curious what you think. And then that's the next that's going to develop them to create this LiDAR, God's Eye. In the next 2 to 3 years, he says that intelligent driving will become an indispensable configuration for buying a car. So he realizes that they needed this, and so they're now positioning themselves with this. Now, he does reference DeepSeek, says that the BYD's architecture will be connected to DeepSeek to improve the AI capabilities of the vehicle in the cloud. And then this is the curious words here, right? So God's Eye A and B is going to support the NOA, navigation of a map, functions in cities and highways. God's Eye C currently supports only high-speed NOA. However, the entry level is expected to support the city in the long term after that. So, some form of navigation. What's your take about this, Jeff?
Yeah, I think if you start with, BYD as a automobile company and electronics component company, I've worked with them for a number of years and know the leadership and respect them. I think you have to start with how they're situated as an automobile company. In the EV world, they have about roughly 40 models. You can look this up, by the way, too. I think people get confused. But there's about 40 different models that they have. And with that, just that brings tremendous complexity. So when I think of, introducing this system with three different tiers of hardware, it tells me that they haven't figured out the end-to-end system. And if you think of the architecture of like Tesla's end-to-end system, Tesla has figured out a way to minimize the per vehicle or the per subscriber hardware cost. And they've taken as much of the brain power and power consumption and put it into the training operation, as much of it as possible. In this case, and Tesla's relying on cameras and some microphone input, but mostly on cameras, photons for input. And here the inputs are far greater, and therefore they're going to need, and it's not clear what they're doing from a cloud perspective in terms of processing all this data and how that works. I mean, they can't buy NVIDIA H100s or the Blackwell equivalents in China. So it's not clear what their end-to-end system looks like. So they have three tiers of systems that are going to span 40 different vehicles. I've seen this before. It's not so much a China thing. I've seen it in the US, I've seen it in Europe. Just when you rush into it. Remember 2 years ago, BYD, the CEO was on the record saying that, I don't think vehicle autonomy is a thing. I don't think we're going to focus on making vehicles. And then all of a sudden last year they went and hired, the scraps of in a many thousand person team. So you have these big teams of people. What do big teams of people come up with? Where they come up with the ability and the bandwidth to develop three tiers of systems that are going to go across 40 some vehicles. He said 110,000 engineers. Why not have 40 different models? But again, all of these things are have honestly no constraints. If you develop three tiers. So when you have a system like that, the constraints are kind of loose. The complexity is very high. These things don't tend to eventually end very well. I mean, we'll see. The proof will be, in what they actually produce and put on the road. I would also, again, I'm not spiking it today. We don't know. Bottom line, this looks like an ADAS system, and it looks like an ADAS system that they're going to train, but it's not clear on where the data goes, how the data gets processed. And you've got Tesla not only, continuing to add and build on this cluster, but they're also really focused on just how many of these GPUs they can get working coherently together. And so it's just not this. To me, this appears to be an ADAS system. So this, I kind of liken it to the 2015, the 2017 Tesla announcement. Put all the input items in the car, capture data. It looks like they've been doing that at least over the last year on some vehicles. But then now this is kind of their hardware rollout. But instead of doing one piece of hardware that goes in all vehicles, they've done three versions of hardware that goes across, upwards of 40 different models. And I think tiering the hardware solution tells me that they haven't solved the core underlying problem, but they know they have to go out there and capture data or they're dead. So this feels a bit forced, and it feels like it could be overrun with complexity very quickly. Just look at the complexity right now of Tesla and hardware 2, 5, and 3, and 4, and just the conversation back and forth on that. Now put three different versions of out there and try to maintain software on those three different versions. Also, and I've had to do this. I mean, go to regulators and say, approve my product. And then instead of the regulator saying, oh, this is BYD, this is what they do in their cars, it's now three different responses for what they do in their cars. And the variation involved with that. So like down the whole chain, this complexity feels like it's going to be a problem. But I mean, let's see what happens. It just feels like they haven't solved the core underlying problem of where the training happens, where the perception happens, and how to minimize the cost structure so you can have 10, 20 million of these products out there, and then your cost structure doesn't scale so much with those. It scales where you can drive utilization at the training side.
Yeah. I agree with you, actually. So whenever you hear this, we're going to hear everybody go, BYD solved full self-driving. Watch out, they're going to be a competitor. But if you read between the lines, right, there's a couple things, two words that they didn't use, neural nets. And so it basically, they didn't talk about, is this coded? They talked about the LiDAR. They talked about the hardware. They needed to say something to show that my cars can actually even just do highway driving, autopilot. It can do advanced ADAS. The example that they gave here was, basically just active emergency brake function. That's what this was. Okay. Avoids traffic cones in a highway, right? Just driving through the highways and all that. And then active emergency braking. So it is an ADAS. They haven't yet switched to neural nets. And by the way, that's the same thing with Huawei. A lot of people are saying, did you see the Huawei video? And just quickly, I got a number of reasons to explain to them that they only switched to neural nets last year in August. They said they're going to switch to that. And so, they're still LiDAR based, they're still code based, and they're trying to make that difference. So yes, you can show you a beautiful video. It doesn't mean that they're way ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a path that's pretty clear if you talk to the NVIDIAs and Teslas of the world and who are widely acclaimed as leaders in autonomy. Tesla's claimed by Sundar at Google and by Jensen as being a leader. Elon claims that his company's a leader as well. And there's a path to doing this, and this just feels like this is an ADAS announcement.
Yeah.
And so let's see where it goes. The other thing I would kind of warn people, especially YouTube influencers, people, if somebody calls you and says, come and take a ride and see a demo of something, you honestly don't know what's actually happening behind the curtain. You don't know if that car's being teleoperated. You don't know if that pathway was mapped. So I would just kind of just be mindful of how the real, by the way, in the US or China or Europe or anywhere in the world, I'm just saying, you really have to understand what's happening. And I could sit here on this podcast and tell stories. I can't tell you how many times I would get a call from BYD, and this isn't a BYD issue per se, but just as a supplier, hey, come see this new process. We figured out how to do it with 99% yields, and I'd come in and I look at it and I'm like, well, okay, well these yields aren't to any standard that I would ever accept on a product, or we would find that there were failures just somewhere else, in the fact. Anyway, just things aren't always what they seem, but at the same time, let's take this announcement, try to understand it and see where it could go, what it could mean, and then figure out if there's some sort of normalized way to understand what it is and how it's actually working. But I wouldn't call this autonomy yet. Not yet.
I mean, we'll keep a close eye. We're not going to underestimate what they can do. But if you truly can do this, what they've announced is not enough for me to say that they've solved full self-driving. You got to explain neural nets. You got to explain how does it deal with different stop signs, with people hand signals, reading, those kind of things. So right now, it just seems
and I would just say, Herbert, that this will trick the best investors. This will trick the best tech people in the world, because it's a difficult thing to measure. It's an easy thing to spoof, and this will fool many people. You've really got to understand the details of what's happening, what they're doing, are the right fundamental things happening. And this isn't to say that Tesla is perfect, because we were sitting here in 2016 thinking that that hardware configuration was going to do turn by turn. So nobody's perfect, but there's been a journey along the way, and to just completely invalidate that journey and say like, well, okay, there's this other. It kind of reminds me a bit of like the $5.6 million in DeepSeek. Like there are portions of that are true, but you really have to understand the whole system end to end. This isn't sour grapes either. It's really just it's really trying to take the whole thing in context. And back to my original point opening up, if I was an operator of this system, I would be very concerned about 40 EV models and three
Yeah.
different tiers of hardware that I would have to support. I would think that complexity alone could be overwhelming. And that's not just hire more people and the complexity goes away. The complexity doesn't go away just because you have more people.
All right, let's move into the next big story here. You got pretty good analysis on this. So over the weekend, people started to get very, very concerned because China hit back with $14 billion worth of tariffs on U.S. goods. So people thought that this is going to be a big deal. Retaliatory tariffs, it looks like that starting Monday, they're going to impose tariffs up to 15% on U.S. goods. What's LNG? Is that new?
Liquid natural gas, yeah.
Yeah, coal, crude oil, farm equipment, certain vehicles. Okay. And it's in retaliation to Trump's additional 10% levy on Chinese imports. They're targeting critical U.S. industries and restricting exports of rare earth materials used in defense, EV batteries, solar panels. So 60% of global rare earth production and 90% of processing. So people read that. They were very, very concerned. And what did you find out about this?
A number of things. First off, so this is China putting tariffs on what they import from the U.S. So people should understand that context. China imports about $150 billion of goods. So if there's $14 billion of goods that are getting tariffs, that's about 9% of what they import. So just at the outset, this wasn't some big escalation. This was a very kind of light reciprocal, like, hey, we don't want this to escalate kind of response. And this is one thing you've got to read when you're going back and forth in negotiation. You're trying to understand, it's poker. Like what hand is the other person on? And to me, this wasn't, I've got aces. I'm trying to lure you in. This is more of like, hey, I don't want this hand. I don't want this to escalate too much. And I'm going to respond with this. And then when you so first off, as the news came out, and it's like it's on X. It's like you see pictures of Xi Jinping, and they've got him with like a mean face. And then I'm waiting, and all of a sudden, like 10 seconds later, it's like, oh my God, vehicles, China, Tesla. And then it's like, oh my God, hang on, hold on. Like, firstly, in terms of imports, China doesn't import vehicles from Tesla except the 2000 Model S and X. That they import, from the U.S. And then when you double click into the actual tariff itself, it's written in Chinese. So there are folks on X who are Chinese nationals that could interpret this. Who I appreciate. And Ron, it actually is, I believe, is a Tesla employee, and he's like, yeah, this is pretty much ICE and hybrid, and then like heavy duty, like industrial type vehicles, large vehicles, not passenger vehicles. So I mean, just even taking that on face values, that would be zero. Instead, right? If you just said it was on S and X, it would be like, okay, this is 0.3% of the China sales for Tesla. Okay, that would get a 15% tariff. It's not even that. It looks like it's 0%. So this shows you. I mean, they could have hit Tesla square in the face. They don't want to do that because Tesla's a huge business. They employ a ton of people in Shanghai. They produce and distribute inside of China about 65% of what they make. They export a ton. China loves the exports, whether it's from if you're building inside of China and locally sourcing inside of China, they love the exports that Tesla does. So yeah, there's really honestly nothing here. Other than they're going back and forth, but it looks like there isn't significant escalation. This looks like it's trying to lead to a conversation, not to just like, we don't care if we do business with you or not. We're just gonna let the chips fall where they may. I think it's really trying to lead to a conversation.
Well, this is so important. Thank you so much, Jeff. Again, initial reaction, oh my God, Tesla's gonna just tank now. You explained really nicely here. You posted, that's why people need to follow you, because you do research during the weekend. Thank you for doing that. You dive down and you said, before anyone starts hyperventilating, Tesla builds about 99.7% of its vehicles sold in China inside of China. So none of those vehicles are subject to this proposed tariff. 0.3% of vehicles would be subject to the 15% tariff if imposed. And then you've said, actually, when you saw that new data point, China may have completely carved Tesla out of the new tariffs if true, because they said it's actually just the large EVs and it's just the ICE and cars as well. So much for the China's going to get Tesla rhetoric. And then you said, again, great analysis here, Jeff. Sold 662,000 cars in China last year. 660,000 of them are made in China, 95% locally sourced. That's where you got your 99.7%. So only 2,000 Model S and X would be subject to the 15% tariff. It's not material. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, I was getting pushback on X. Like, you don't know. I mean, this looks like this is where it starts, and then it just spirals out of control. I did that portion of the analysis. I'm telling you, the response was very light from China. They're responding because they have to respond, because they're in the middle of a round where if somebody launches, you have to respond. You don't just sit there. So I don't view the response as escalatory. Could this become a problem? Of course. Sure. Of course anything could happen, but if you're reading the response was very light in nature. And so we'll see where this goes. And I think people need to remember, if you were to take and look at the tariffs put on by every country, if you could draw a map of the lines going back and forth connecting each country, you would be shocked at the tariffs that are put on American goods, the size and the rate relative to the size and the rate that America has put on its trading partners. So just keep that in mind. I think if you espouse, like, you want to be free trade, I think you should look at that chart and understand it, because free trade would be as maybe there needs to be some escalation to bring the whole net set of tariffs down that's on everybody. So anyway, just an interesting thing to discuss.
Again, so many, all these news that comes out and everybody's freaking out. And again, appreciate you coming in. Another one that's been happening quite just consistently for the last 2 weeks is this idea that Tesla sales has been tanking. Have you seen what's going on in Europe? Have you been seeing what's going on everywhere? Anti-Elon, hate, it's happening. So again, you have been speaking out on this. You did a show on it last week. It just keeps coming up. And here's a post from AJ. We like him. He does quite good work researching things. And he says this: Tesla sales are tanking across the world. This, or a version of this nonsense you've read last week, while in reality, this was driven by some very obvious drivers. Number one, there's the new Model Y. Jeff, you were the first to actually point this out. Even way back in December, you said, what's going to happen in January, because it's a crossover. You've done this before. New Model Ys, they have to draw down the inventory, and exactly the way you predicted it. That's what happened. And people are like completely forgetting that they did this transfer. I'm not going to read everything he said here, but people were waiting for the Model Y. But you've always been saying, Jeff, that there's all this nuance. People need to understand there's all these things. Don't just take one thing. Europe imposed an additional 8% tariffs on Model 3s, making the price difference between Model 3 and Y very small. Since the Model 3 is after the launch of the new Model Y, not the latest Tesla anymore, given the small price difference, it's also logical to expect some Model 3 demand moves up to the new Model Y. Seasonality. We know that January, February is always lower across the globe, driven by winter, Europe and North America, winter, and New Year in Asia. So there's auto sales always lowest in first quarter. One-time effects in specific markets, right? Local incentives. One example is Germany. Germany's complete removal of purchase incentives and tariffs on China-made EVs, like the Tesla Model 3s, affect demand. Bottom line, given these factors, we will see a significant sequential demand surge once Tesla opens a new Model Y floodgates. It's just an example of somebody saying, look at these falling prices in Germany, and then not taking into consideration all these other things. I'm sorry, this is AJ's work here explaining all the things that could affect it. And I'm just gonna, if you guys want to see it, pause the video and we'll look at it. What's your thinking, Jeff?
Yeah, AJ does great. This is what we talked about this in December. We talked about it in January. To do this Model Y changeover, Tesla was looking at Q4 and they're like, okay, I got to hit 515 and I have this new version of the vehicle coming. And there are it was still under design. There were still components ramping. The supply base was probably having issues. So just think of like two trains are approaching you. And this one train is, well, I got to get production to a certain level, get my fixed costs down in Q4. I promised, in the prior analyst call, trying to get to the 515. And at some point in the quarter in Q4, they realized they weren't getting to the 515. And then they also looked at the new Model Y is I've been in this position before. You look at the new version. Okay, it's on track. Great. It's tracking. It's good. Boom. The decision went out in Q4. Take the inventory down, take it down to, when this is what people understand. 12 days of inventory doesn't mean like there's 12 days of inventory everywhere, because most of that is depending on where you are relative to the Tesla factory, to the source of supply is what the term is used. You can have zero in some Tesla stores and locations. So there's a certain days of supply in channel inventory where if you cross that threshold, you start getting to stock out level. And it's different for every single industry. It's different for every single company and every single rate of supply and rate of sales. But from what I'm seeing, Tesla well below the 20 days of inventory is put themselves into major stock out territory. So the follow-on effect of that is that actually dampens sales. And I was the first to say, by the way, of like, you got to keep the inventory down, you got to do the transition to the new product, and you got to hit your sales target. But at some point there's a trade-off that needs to be executed. And the trade-off was nobody's going to remember 495,000 units in the quarter versus 505 or whatever, 506 was the expectation. I want the inventory to zero, close to zero as possible, and I want to get ready to do the changeover, by version of Model Y in the first quarter. So anyway, yeah. And then the calls of like trying to make this a single issue thing of like demand destruction is worth a double click every time. It's usually multiple reasons. And anyway, and that's the thing that January sales in a quarter, you've really got to look at what did you exit the prior quarter with inventory? What's your it's called BOH, beginning on hand, in the start the quarter. And then you're ramping up a new model, you're just not going to be in supply at rate. But I think Tesla's made a step since Model 3 in doing these changeovers. I think this is far better. I still think that they can get even better. I still think that you'd still want to have the situation of more of the new Model Y in supply when they're cutting off the old one. But I think they're getting better.
Such a great point. So we're not saying that Tesla's sales did not go down. It's just that don't just assume it's because of Elon hate or it's because the demand has fallen. That's it. It's over for Tesla. There's a lot of reasons. Please understand all the various reasons and then try to weigh it together. So again, appreciate the analysis there, Jeff. We got a few more things that happened this weekend. Tesla dropped this beautiful video of the walkthrough of the new Model Y. I'm going to play just a little bit of it. We can watch of it, and then we'll point out some of the key points that they made about it.
The Model Y was already the best-selling car on the planet, and the all-new Model Y just got better.
When we set out to redesign the Model Y, we looked at trying to give the car a little bit more of its own unique personality.
One of the first things you'll notice is the light bar. And what this does is push the vehicle to look a little bit wider, look a little more planted on the road. And with this duct, we've been able to widen it slightly and get a little more air over that front tire.
At Tesla, we're always focused on efficiency. What customers care about is real-world driving efficiency. That's up almost 10%.
And we did that by revisiting every single component. These might be the most efficient tires we've made. They have lower rolling resistance, better handling, and less road noise.
And that's coupled to a brand new suspension design, specifically focused on improving ride comfort and especially impact harshness.
We have retained all what we consider Tesla DNA in the form of how the vehicle steers, how the vehicle handles, but at the same time, we have improved the ride comfort. The noise is going to be turned down by at least 20%. This mainly came as an improvement from all the glass area that now is acoustic glass, and as well we have improved all the seals material. We get a better closure.
It also allows the blower to run at a lower speed, reducing cabin noise and consuming less energy.
Giving you an isolated, comfortable ride, so when you drive, you can be in your own world.
Okay. Now, I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's a 5-minute long video. Go to the Tesla's X account and you can watch this thing. But it's such a beautiful car, just beautifully designed. You can see all the things that they said. The other thing that they talked about, though, is, and then this is different. You had Jay Leno interview this morning, and they dropped that video. And then a couple important points that just happened a few minutes ago. Lars confirmed that Tesla is going to be releasing a 7-seater Model Y variant later on. That's great. And then he also said that this headlight is matrix LED headlights, and in a couple months, Tesla will introduce automatic adaptive driving beams. I've got a little quick video of that, him talking about that. That's, no, I don't have it. Okay, so the fun thing too is you've got Franz, and then people are pointing out little Easter eggs at the back here. Let's go through it really quickly. There's this thing here. What's under the hood there? Is that the new Model 2? Possibly, maybe the cyber cap. It looks like actually just a cyber cap. And there's these 3 things here. What's this? What's this? Who knows? It's just for fun. Teasing us. There you go. That's probably the cyber cap.
Yeah.
And then the other, sorry?
No, I'm just saying we know they're working on newer models. So yeah, there's going to be things on it, or those could be anything. Those could be for photography later on. So just people just should know that those could be anything.
When John interviewed
new vehicles,
the engineers, this guy was wearing a shirt that says that's number 2 on it. So it's just for fun. Okay. And then of course there's a robe van in the back. The other thing that they showed, or that this is a new Model Y that was sighted in China, front end, the rear end, and the wheels were camouflaged. Is this possibly the Model Y Performance? So we're starting to see cars like this out there. And it's probably the Model Y Performance. Yeah. I think we've known that that's more likely what it's going to be.
I don't know.
See?
Yeah. It could be the prototype new Model Y that's just re-rigged with some different hardware for some sort of evaluation. There's a concept in production called a PRQ build. Basically, it's a post. You've started production, and what you're doing is you're evaluating new components offline. And if those new components or new manufacturing processes are good, you'd roll them back into production. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla just maintains their Model Y camouflage vehicle out there, and then maybe pulls a module out, swaps it out, puts something in, and then puts it out on the road. The performance Model Y isn't going to look dramatically different unless we're missing something. It shouldn't look dramatically different, but yeah, it's always fun to kind of guess.
I think one of the best features of the new Model Y is that they actually have a new front camera on the bumper. And so this is Chuck Cook pulling out the clip of that video I was showing earlier, where Pete Bannon talks about this fascia camera on the front of the Model Y, and Pete's saying that it has a 100-degree field of view to look for objects coming from both sides. Let's listen to what he said.
Autopilot 4, it includes a much higher performance autopilot computer, so new cameras all around the car. It also has a fascia camera down here. It's a 180-degree field of view, so we can see objects coming from either side of the car.
All of this combines to hopefully never get you into an accident. But if you do, you're protected by the best passive safety system on the market. 5-star ratings overall.
I don't know, Jeff. I mean, that is fantastic, right? You got that camera there, 180-degree view. So to me, that's the missing piece that everybody was asking for, right? This having a little bit more visibility when you're trying to get into cross traffic and so forth.
Yeah, it feels like Tesla's taking another step in terms of inputs between that camera and then the micro, for listening for sirens and emergency vehicles. It feels like these are some of the things that Tesla, believes that they need to be able to clean up, to get to that next level. Remember, they're focused on disengagement rate, but they have sensors all over the vehicle, and they're also focusing on ride comfort as well. And there's going to be this relation between the inputs, what's processed on the vehicle, and what they do in training to get not only the disengagements down, but to get it to be the most comfortable ride. I know sometimes people think about it. I think we're just so focused on, like, can it drive without disengagements? But I believe along the way, these aren't serial events. I think in parallel, Tesla's working on ride comfort. So you'll, at the end of this, which will never be an end, it'll always be getting better. But at the point of when it's 10 times, 20 times safer than a human, I think you're also going to see massive improvements in ride comfort. So you're not being kind of, it's going to be a non-human like, or it's going to go from trying to be a human like experience to then it's going to be non-human like, because it's going to be so much more comfortable. That's what I think is happening.
And also doesn't mean that Model 3s that don't have that, or the cars that don't have the front fascia camera, can't be full self-driving. You and I are driving our cars incredibly well. I drove mine 8 hours yesterday, multiple cities, and 0 disengagements. Perfect car. So, okay, a couple other news that we can report here. Tesla North America announced a 0.99% APR financing now available for Model 3s in Canada. They did raise the prices, so there's going to be taxes. So this is still, there are more promotions there. And then they increased the price of the Model X by $5,000. This is very curious in the US, and now no longer qualifies for the $7,500 Fed EV credit. But they all come with the free lifetime supercharging. So this is very odd. They raised the price by $5,000. You can see here. And then Sawyer thought, well, he wonders if maybe Tesla did this so they can push the buyers towards getting a Cybertruck instead. Since the X no longer qualifies for it, the Cybertruck is now $12,500 less expensive than the Model X all-wheel drive for those who qualify. You think so? I mean, they're two separate markets, but yeah, one's a lot cheaper than the other.
Yeah, I think a lot of this just has to do with channel inventory and sequencing of production. There's a price to start and stop production, to start and stop distribution, and there's always a price to move product in channel. That's why we've had quarters of discounting, and I think if people just kind of close their eyes and think of it as you've got to move product through, from components through the factory all the way through to the channel. And sometimes there's more product in the channel you want, sometimes there's less. And sometimes if there's less, sometimes this is micro or macroeconomics 101, you raise prices. So if they don't have an intention my point is they don't have an intention of making the same rate or same gross number of Model X's, you may raise the price knowing that your consumption rate is this. You may be able to raise prices and still get the consumption that you're looking for, but get more margins.
Perfect. You're the perfect person today to answer quite a number of these questions, almost all of them. In fact, all of them. Thank you, Jeff. Follow him on his X account, the Jeff Lutz. Subscribe to him. You'll get this kind of analysis and just debunk anything. Now, not everything is wrong, but some things are really wrong. And you can see a couple of them here today. Thank you, Jeff. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.